Oklahoma prairies, rodeos, Native American heritage, the Sooner State, bigger than Cambodia, fewer people than San Antonio. Sounds iconic, right? A slice of rugged Americana. But before you start packing your bags and dreaming of wide open spaces, let me tell you, there's a lot more to this story, and frankly, most of it isn't pretty. Not by a long shot, not even if you squint really, really hard. Because here's the unvarnished truth. Oklahoma is losing residents. People are literally fleeing, packing their U-Hauls and not looking back. And U.S. News and World Report just slapped it with the title of 7th worst state to live in for 2025. 7th. That's not just bad. That's actively repelling human beings bad. This isn't a drill, folks. It's a demographic 5-alarm fire, and the flames are licking at the state capitol. So the big question, the one that probably brought you here, could endure it. A state where decent jobs are a constant soul-crushing battle. The nearest doctor is a full tank of gas road trip away, and the wind howls with the kind of genuine house-flattening danger that makes you want to live exclusively in a reinforced concrete bunker. Tonight, we're diving in. We're uncovering the truth. Let's get into why Oklahoma is struggling so damn hard. Right, let's talk about something deeply uncomfortable but utterly crucial: poverty. In Oklahoma, poverty isn't just a statistic they trot out during election season. It's a heavy, suffocating blanket draped over a significant portion of the population. We're talking about a state where nearly 15% of people live below the poverty line. That's almost 1 in every 6 Oklahomans struggling to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to keep the lights on. It's a figure that should make anyone pause, especially when you consider the supposed American dream we're all meant to be chasing. For many in Oklahoma, that dream looks more like a recurring nightmare where the bills are always due, and the pantry is always bare. And it's not just about some abstract poverty line, it's about the cold, hard cash or lack thereof. The median household income in Oklahoma consistently lags behind the national average, stubbornly refusing to catch up. Think about that. Year after year, Oklahomans are, on average, earning less than their counterparts in other states. This isn't a recipe for prosperity, it's a recipe for perpetual financial anxiety. It means less money for groceries, for childcare, for car repairs, for anything beyond the absolute bare essentials. It means tough choices, like deciding between paying the rent or buying medicine, a choice no one should ever have to make in a country as wealthy as this one. It's a systemic issue that traps families in cycles of debt and despair. This financial strain inevitably leads to another grim reality: food insecurity. Yes, in the heartland of America, a state known for its agriculture, people are going hungry. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? Miles of farmland, yet families are struggling to find their next meal. Food banks are stretched thin, and the demand often outstrips supply. Children go to school hungry, affecting their ability to learn and grow. This isn't just a statistic, it's a profound human tragedy unfolding daily. The psychological toll of not knowing where your next meal is coming from is immense, eroding hope and dignity with every passing day, creating a constant state of stress that wears people down. So what happens when the weight of poverty becomes too much to bear? Well, people do what people have always done when faced with insurmountable odds. They leave. Families are packing up, saying goodbye to their communities, their history, their roots, all in search of better opportunities elsewhere. They're looking for states with stronger economies, better paying jobs, and a more robust social safety net. This isn't a betrayal of Oklahoma, it's an act of survival. But it creates a devastating brain drain and a hollowing out of communities, leaving behind an aging population and an even more concentrated level of poverty. It's a vicious cycle, and breaking it requires more than just thoughts and prayers. It requires real systemic change. Alright, let's pivot from empty pockets to, well, potentially empty homes due to burglary or worse. Let's talk crime. Because if you're thinking of moving to Oklahoma, you might want to invest in a very good security system, perhaps a moat, maybe even a small, highly trained private army. I'm only slightly exaggerating. Oklahoma consistently reports crime rates for both violent and property offenses that are significantly higher than the national average. We're not talking about a few extra car break-ins here. We're talking about numbers that make you double-check your locks and then check them again just to be sure. This isn't some media-hyped fear-mongering campaign. These are the sobering statistics that paint a picture of a state grappling with serious safety concerns. A significant driver of this crime wave, particularly the violent kind, is rather depressingly fueled by drugs. We'll get into the specifics of Oklahoma's drug crisis later, and believe me, it's a doozy. But for now, understand that the desperation and violence associated with drug trafficking and addiction spill onto the streets, impacting communities large and small. Methamphetamine and opioid abuse are rampant, and with them come a host of related crimes, robberies to feed habits, turf wars between dealers, and an overall erosion of public safety. It creates an environment where residents feel perpetually on edge, where the simple act of walking down the street can feel like a gamble. Compounding this already grim picture is a persistent shortage of police officers. Yes, in a state with high crime rates, there often aren't enough cops on the beat. This isn't a dig at the officers themselves, who are often overworked and under-resourced. It's a systemic problem. Recruitment is difficult, retention is a challenge, and funding for law enforcement can be a political football. The result? Slower response times, less proactive policing, and a feeling among citizens that they're largely on their own. When you call 911 and the nearest officer is miles away or departments are stretched so thin they can only respond to the most severe emergencies, it doesn't exactly inspire confidence in the system designed to protect you. All of this culminates in neighborhoods that many residents describe as unsafe. There are areas where people are afraid to let their children play outside, where businesses struggle to stay open due to theft and vandalism, and where the sense of community is fractured by fear. This isn't just an urban problem either. Rural areas also face significant challenges with crime, often with even fewer law enforcement resources. The dream of a quiet, peaceful life can quickly turn into a nightmare when you're constantly worried about your safety and the safety of your loved ones. And let's be honest, peace of mind isn't a luxury, it's a basic human need. And in parts of Oklahoma, it's in critically short supply. Now, if you have children, or plan to, or simply care about the future of society, which ideally should be everyone, let's talk about Oklahoma's education system. And I'm going to be blunt, it's heartbreaking. We're looking at a state that consistently ranks near the bottom nationally for educational outcomes. Think about that. The place tasked with shaping young minds, with providing the foundation for future success, is, in many ways, failing its students. Low graduation rates are a persistent scourge, meaning too many young Oklahomans are entering adulthood without even the basic credential of a high school diploma. This isn't just a statistic, it's a pipeline to limited opportunities and often continued poverty. A massive part of the problem, as you might expect, is funding, or rather, the chronic of it. Oklahoma has a long and sorry history of underfunding its public schools. Per-pupil spending is often well below the national average, leading to overcrowded classrooms, outdated textbooks, and a desperate shortage of essential resources. Teachers are forced to dig into their own pockets for basic supplies, an act of dedication that is admirable, but also a damning indictment of the system itself. When you don't invest in education, you're not saving money, you're mortgaging the future, and Oklahoma has been taking out some very high-interest loans on its children's potential for decades. This lack of funding and support inevitably leads to another crisis: teacher shortages. Oklahoma's teachers are among the lowest paid in the nation. Combine that with challenging working conditions and a lack of respect from some policymakers, and is it any wonder that attracting and retaining qualified educators is a Herculean task? Many talented teachers leave the state for better pay and more supportive environments, while others leave the profession altogether, burned out and disillusioned. The result is classrooms staffed by long-term substitutes, emergency-certified individuals with minimal training, or simply larger class sizes, all of which dilute the quality of education the students receive. It's a brain drain at the foundational level. And we absolutely cannot talk about education in Oklahoma without addressing the profound disparities that exist, particularly for Native American students. Despite their deep historical and cultural ties to the land, Native American children often face systemic disadvantages within the education system. Culturally insensitive curricula, lack of Native representation among educators, and insufficient resources targeted to their specific needs contribute to achievement gaps and higher dropout rates. This isn't just an educational failure, it's a moral one. A state with such a significant Native American population has a profound responsibility to provide equitable and excellent education for all its children, and right now, Oklahoma is falling tragically short of that obligation. Alright, deep breaths everyone, because we're about to wade into the murky, often terrifying waters of Oklahoma's healthcare system. Or perhaps more accurately, the healthcare lack of system. If you thought the schools were in trouble, wait until you hear about how Oklahoma cares for its sick and injured. The state consistently finds itself languishing at the bottom of national health rankings. We're talking high rates of chronic diseases like obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, coupled with alarmingly low life expectancy figures compared to other states. Oklahomans are, statistically speaking, sicker and die younger. That's not a comforting thought, is it? It's the kind of statistic that makes you want to eat a salad and then immediately check your health insurance policy. Speaking of health insurance, a significant portion of Oklahomans simply don't have it. The uninsured rate in the state is stubbornly high, leaving hundreds of thousands of people one medical emergency away from financial ruin. This isn't because they don't want insurance, it's often because they can't afford it, or their jobs don't offer it, or they fall into a coverage gap. And what happens when you don't have insurance? You delay or forego necessary medical care. Minor problems become major ones. Preventative care becomes a luxury you can't afford. This leads to poorer health outcomes, higher healthcare costs in the long run, often footed by taxpayers when uninsured individuals end up in emergency rooms, and a tremendous amount of stress and suffering for families. Then there's the issue of actually finding a doctor, especially if you live in a rural part of the state, which, let's remember, is a lot of Oklahoma. Doctor shortages are a critical problem. Many counties have few or no primary care physicians, let alone specialists. This means long drives, sometimes hours, just for a routine checkup or to see a doctor when you're sick. Imagine being elderly, or having young children, or lacking reliable transportation, and facing that kind of barrier to care. It's not just an inconvenience, it's a genuine threat to health and well-being. And good luck if you need specialized care. You might as well pack a suitcase because you're probably going out of state. And let's not forget mental health services, which in Oklahoma are often more of a theoretical concept than an accessible reality. The state faces a severe shortage of mental health professionals and facilities, particularly in rural areas. Waiting lists are long, and many people with mental illness or substance abuse disorders, which, as we've touched on, are significant issues here, receive little to no treatment. This has devastating consequences for individuals, families, and communities, contributing to higher rates of suicide, addiction, and homelessness. It's a silent crisis that screams for attention and resources, but often only gets whispers of concern and a shrug of budgetary constraints. So, you're poor, possibly a victim of crime, your kids are in struggling schools, and you can't find a doctor, but surely you might think, surely the economy is booming, right? There must be jobs. Well, about that. Oklahoma's economy can best be described as, shall we say, sluggish, like a tractor stuck in mud. We're talking slow GDP growth and job creation that often fails to keep pace with the rest of the nation. This isn't the dynamic, vibrant economy that attracts investment and talent. It's an economy that feels like it's constantly trying to catch its breath, often wheezing from the exertion of just trying to stay afloat in a rapidly changing national landscape. A big part of this economic lethargy is its heavy reliance on the boom and bust cycles of the oil and gas industry. When oil prices are high, Oklahoma does reasonably well, or at least certain sectors do. But when prices inevitably crater, as they so often do, the state's economy takes a nosedive. This creates a volatile and unpredictable environment, not exactly conducive to long-term planning or sustainable growth. It's like basing your entire household budget on your TO's occasional lottery wins. Exciting when it happens, but a terrible long-term financial strategy. Diversification has been a buzzword for years, but meaningful progress has been painfully slow. Compounding this is the state's relatively low educational attainment levels, which we've already touched upon. A less educated workforce is, frankly, less attractive to businesses looking to invest in high-skill, high-wage industries. Companies that require a highly trained and adaptable labor pool often look elsewhere, to states that have prioritized education and workforce development. This leaves Oklahoma often competing for lower-wage, lower-skilled jobs, which does little to boost overall prosperity or provide pathways to the middle class for many of its residents. It's a classic chicken and egg problem. You need good jobs to attract and retain educated workers, but you need educated workers to attract good jobs. And what does all this mean for the average Oklahoman worker? Stagnant wages. Even when jobs are available, they often don't pay enough to keep up with the rising cost of living. People find themselves working harder for less, treading water financially, or slowly sinking. The promise of upward mobility feels increasingly out of reach for many. This isn't just an economic issue, it's a social one, fueling frustration, resentment, and a sense that the system is rigged against the working class. When the economy isn't delivering for its people, it's not just numbers on a spreadsheet that suffer. It's the hopes and dreams of an entire population. Right, so the economy's a bit wobbly, but surely the roads are smooth, the bridges are sturdy, and the internet is lightning fast, right? Oh, you sweet summer child, let's talk about Oklahoma's infrastructure, or as I like to call it, America's crumbling concrete obstacle course. The state is notorious for its poor road and bridge conditions. We're talking potholes that could swallow a small car crumbling asphalt, and bridges that look like they were designed by someone who really hated civil engineers. Driving in Oklahoma isn't just a commute, it's an adventure in suspension testing and tire replacement. And it's not just an inconvenience, it's a safety hazard and a drain on the economy, costing drivers millions in vehicle repairs. And if you're thinking, well, I'll just take public transit, I have some bad news for you. Outside of a few urban centers, public transportation in Oklahoma is, to put it mildly, sparse. For vast swaths of the state, particularly rural areas, it's virtually non-existent. This leaves people entirely dependent on personal vehicles which, as we've established, take a beating on the terrible roads. It also isolates those who cannot drive or afford a car, the elderly, the disabled, the very poor, cutting them off from jobs, healthcare, and essential services. It's a system that prioritizes cars, and even then, doesn't do a very good job of supporting them, but the infrastructure woes don't stop at the surface. Let's talk about what's under the groundwater systems. Many parts of Oklahoma are dealing with aging, leaky water pipes and outdated treatment facilities. This can lead to water main breaks, service disruptions, and concerns about water quality. Investing in water infrastructure is expensive and often invisible, making it an easy target for deferral when budgets are tight. But kicking that can down the poorly maintained road eventually leads to a crisis, and for some Oklahoma communities that crisis is already lapping at their doorstep, sometimes literally if a main bursts dramatically enough. And then there's the joy of frequent power outages and limited internet access. Oklahoma's power grid can be vulnerable, especially during extreme weather, which, as we'll discuss, is a frequent visitor. And in the 21st century, reliable high-speed internet isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for education, business, healthcare, and basic civic participation. Yet many rural Oklahomans still struggle with slow, unreliable, or completely unavailable broadband. This digital divide further exacerbates existing inequalities, holding back economic development and limiting opportunities for those on the wrong side of the fiber optic cable. It's like trying to compete in a Formula One race using a horse and buggy. Now, if the man-made problems weren't enough to contend with, Oklahoma also happens to be a magnet for Mother Nature's more dramatic and frankly, terrifying outbursts. We are, of course, talking about Tornado Alley. And Oklahoma isn't just in Tornado Alley, it's practically the capital, the main stage, the place where tornadoes come to put on their most destructive shows. The frequency and intensity of tornadoes in Oklahoma are legendary, and for residents, tornado season isn't just a meteorological term. It's a period of genuine anxiety, constant weather watching, and hoping your storm shelter is up to snuff. The threat is ever present, and the devastation when it strikes can be absolute. But it's not just the twisters you have to worry about. Oklahoma also gets its fair share of severe flooding. Heavy rains can quickly overwhelm rivers and drainage systems, leading to widespread inundation of homes, businesses, and agricultural land. One year it might be a drought, the next you're kayaking down Main Street. This hydrological whiplash makes long-term planning incredibly difficult and puts immense strain on infrastructure and emergency services. And let's not forget the droughts themselves, which can be prolonged and devastating, crippling agriculture, leading to water shortages and increasing the risk of wildfires. It's a meteorological triple threat: too much wind, too much water, or not enough water. Pick your poison. All of this extreme weather has a very predictable and very expensive consequence: rising insurance costs. Homeowners and business owners in Oklahoma often face some of the highest insurance premiums in the country, particularly for policies covering wind and hail damage. And those costs are only going up as severe weather events become more frequent and intense, a trend many scientists link to climate change, a topic that, shall we say, doesn't always get the most enthusiastic reception in Oklahoma's political circles. This makes owning property increasingly unaffordable for many, adding another layer of financial pressure onto already strained households. The impact of these natural disasters on residents is profound and multifaceted. Beyond the immediate threat to life and property, there's the psychological toll of living under constant threat, the disruption to daily life, the financial burden of rebuilding, and the emotional trauma of loss. Communities are resilient, yes, but there's a limit to how many times you can pick up the pieces before the spirit starts to fray. It's a relentless cycle of destruction and recovery, a testament to the tenacity of Oklahomans, but also a harsh reminder of the unforgiving environment they inhabit. It's one thing to be Oklahoma strong, it's another to be perpetually battered. We've touched on it briefly, but now it's time to stare directly into the abyss, Oklahoma's devastating drug crisis. This isn't some minor issue simmering on the back burner. It's a full-blown inferno raging across the state, leaving a trail of shattered lives, broken families, and communities in turmoil. The primary culprits: methamphetamine and opioids. These substances have sunk their claws deep into the fabric of Oklahoma society, creating a public health emergency of staggering proportions. The addiction rates are alarmingly high, and the human cost is immeasurable, as each statistic represents a person, a story, a future lost. The meth epidemic in particular has been a long and brutal battle for Oklahoma. Cheap, potent, and highly addictive, meth has ravaged communities, fueling crime, overwhelming social services, and tearing families apart. The production and distribution of methamphetamine bring with them a host of associated problems, from clandestine labs posing environmental hazards to the violence inherent in the drug trade, and opioid addiction, initially fueled by the overprescription of painkillers and now increasingly by illicit fentanyl, has added another devastating layer to the crisis, with overdose deaths reaching tragic new heights. It's a two-front war against addiction, and Oklahoma is frankly losing too many battles. This rampant drug abuse is inextricably linked to the state's high crime rates, which we discussed earlier. A significant portion of property crime, and indeed violent crime, is driven by individuals seeking to fund their addictions. Desperation breeds criminality, and when people are in the grips of a powerful substance dependency, they often resort to theft, burglary, or even robbery. This creates a climate of fear and insecurity, where residents feel unsafe in their own homes and neighborhoods. It also places an enormous strain on law enforcement, who are often on the C list of responders to what is fundamentally a public health issue, not just a criminal one. And remember that police understaffing we talked about? It makes tackling this drug-fueled crime wave even more challenging. Fewer officers on the streets mean less capacity for investigation, interdiction, and community policing initiatives that could help address the root causes of drug abuse. Communities struggling with the fallout of the drug crisis often feel abandoned and unheard. The safety concerns are palpable. The problem is too big, too entrenched, can be overwhelming. It's a crisis that demands a response comprehensive, well-funded, and compassionate, but too often it receives a piecemeal approach and moralistic finger-wagging. Now you might hear that Oklahoma has low home prices and think, aha, a silver lining. And it's true, compared to many coastal states or booming metropolises, you can, on paper, get more house for your buck in Oklahoma. But, and this is a very big Oklahoma-sized but, that affordability often comes with a hefty side of risk and a whole host of hidden problems. It's like buying a suspiciously cheap used car. It might look okay on the lot, but you just know there's something lurking under the hood that's going to cost you dearly down the line. So yes, the sticker price might be lower, but the true cost of housing can be surprisingly and painfully high. One of the first hurdles is that even with lower prices, barriers to homeownership can be significant for many Oklahomans, especially given the low median incomes and stagnant wages we've discussed. Saving up for a down payment and closing costs can feel like climbing Mount Everest when you're barely making ends meet. And for those who do manage to scrape enough together, they might find that the affordable homes are concentrated in areas with underfunded schools, high crime rates, or limited access to amenities and job opportunities. It's often a trade-off and rarely a good one. For those who rent, the situation isn't necessarily much better. While rental costs might seem lower than in other states, they can still consume a disproportionate amount of a low-income family's budget. And the quality of rental housing can be a serious concern. Reports of code violations, neglectful landlords, and unsafe living conditions are not uncommon. Tenants often have limited recourse and may fear eviction if they speak out. So, you might be paying less rent, but you could also be living with leaky roofs, faulty wiring, or a pest infestation that would make a horror movie director blush. Affordable shouldn't mean uninhabitable, but sometimes in Oklahoma the line gets a bit blurry. And let's not forget those ever-present natural hazards. Many affordable homes are located in areas prone to flooding, sometimes areas that repeatedly flood yet continue to be rebuilt, a triumph of hope over hydrological experience. And as we mentioned, the cost of homeowners insurance, particularly for flood and tornado coverage, can be astronomical, effectively wiping out any savings from the lower purchase price. So, you might find a cheap house, but then you're one bad storm or one overflowing creek away from financial devastation, or at the very least, an annual insurance bill that makes your eyes water more than an Oklahoma dust storm. It's a gamble, and the house doesn't always win. Oh, Oklahoma politics, where do I even begin? It's a subject so rich with, let's call it character, that it could fuel a dozen satirical sitcoms. If you're looking for smooth, efficient, and responsive governance, well, you might want to keep looking. Oklahoma has certainly had its share of political scandals and corruption allegations over the years, enough to make even the most jaded observer raise an eyebrow. This isn't to say every politician is corrupt, of course not, but the perception and sometimes the reality of self-dealing and ethical lapses can erode public trust faster than a tornado rips through a trailer park. And when trust in government is low, addressing the state's many pressing problems becomes even harder. Then there are the perennial budget deficits and the political wrangling that accompanies them. For years, Oklahoma has struggled to adequately fund essential state services, education, healthcare, infrastructure, you name it. This is often due to a combination of factors: a tax system heavily reliant on volatile oil and gas revenue, a political aversion to raising taxes even for critical needs, and ideological battles over the role and size of government. The result is often last-minute budget crises, cuts to vital programs, and a general sense that the state is lurching from one fiscal emergency to the next, like a drunk trying to navigate an obstacle course. It's no way to run a state, folks, and we can't talk about Oklahoma politics without mentioning gun laws, or rather the enthusiastic lack thereof. Oklahoma boasts some of the loosest gun laws in the entire country. While proponents champion this as a bastion of Second Amendment rights, critics point to the potential impact on public safety, especially in a state already grappling with high rates of violent crime and domestic violence. The debate is, as you can imagine, highly polarized and deeply entrenched, with little room for nuance or compromise. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, it's a significant feature of Oklahoma's political landscape, and one that contributes to its unique, and some would say, unsettling character. All of this can lead to a sense of policy frustration and deep cynicism among the populace, which perhaps contributes to Oklahoma's relatively low voter turnout rates. When people feel like their voices aren't heard, or that the political system is unresponsive to their needs, or that politicians are more interested in partisan squabbling than problem-solving, they tend to disengage. This creates a feedback loop where the problems persist, and the political will to address them diminishes. It's a recipe for stagnation, and for a state facing as many challenges as Oklahoma, stagnation is a luxury it simply cannot afford. It needs bold leadership and effective governance, and too often it seems to get neither. Now let's delve into a topic that underpins many of Oklahoma's other problems: social inequality. This isn't just about rich versus poor, though that's certainly a part of it. It's about systemic disparities that impact different groups in vastly different ways, creating a fractured landscape where opportunity is far from evenly distributed. For a state that often prides itself on its rugged individualism, the playing field is, for many, decidedly unlevel. These aren't just minor cracks in the societal foundation, these are deep, gaping chasms that threaten the stability and cohesion of the entire state, making it harder for everyone to prosper. We've already touched on the challenges faced by Native American communities, but it bears repeating and expanding. Despite their profound historical and cultural significance to Oklahoma, a state whose very name comes from Choctaw words meaning red people, Native Americans often experience significant disparities in health outcomes, educational attainment, economic opportunity, and access to justice. Generations of historical trauma, broken treaties, and systemic discrimination have created deep-rooted challenges that persist to this day. Addressing these inequities requires more than just acknowledgement. It demands a genuine commitment to reconciliation, respect for tribal sovereignty, and targeted investments to empower Native communities. But the lines of inequality aren't just drawn along racial and ethnic lines. Hispanic communities in Oklahoma, a growing demographic, also face their own unique set of challenges, including language barriers, immigration-related concerns, and discrimination, which can limit access to education, healthcare, and economic advancement. Women in Oklahoma often contend with significant gender pay gaps, underrepresentation in leadership positions, and challenges in accessing reproductive health care. contributing to broader economic and social disadvantages. And then there's the stark rural versus urban divide, where those living in remote areas often have far less access to jobs, services, and infrastructure than their counterparts in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. These inequalities are further compounded by issues around voting access. While not always as overtly restrictive as in some other states, subtle barriers can still disproportionately affect marginalized communities. Things like limited polling locations in certain areas, voter ID laws that may be harder for some to comply with, or a lack of resources for voter education and outreach. When certain groups find it harder to make their voices heard at the ballot box, it perpetuates a cycle where their concerns are less likely to be addressed by policymakers, further entrenching the very inequalities that hold them back. It's a system that, intentionally or not, often reinforces the status quo, making it harder for Oklahoma to become a truly equitable place for all its residents. Finally, let's talk about one of the most insidious and long-term consequences of all these interconnected problems, the brain drain. This isn't about a literal draining of brains, obviously, though given some of the policy decisions you might wonder. No, this is about the outmigration of young, educated, and talented individuals who see greener pastures, or at least less brown, less tornado-prone pastures elsewhere. When a state consistently fails to provide opportunities, a good quality of life, and a supportive environment for its brightest minds, those minds, quite logically, tend to go where they are valued and can thrive. And Oklahoma, I'm sorry to say, is experiencing this in spades. Young people, fresh out of college or early in their careers, look around Oklahoma and see many of the issues we've discussed. Limited job prospects in diverse fields, low wages, underfunded public services, and a social and political climate that may not align with their values. So, they pack their degrees and their ambitions and head to states with more dynamic economies, better amenities, and a greater sense of optimism about the future. This isn't an indictment of their loyalty to Oklahoma, it's a rational decision based on a clear-eyed assessment of their prospects. Who can blame them for wanting to build a life where their potential isn't constantly bumping up against systemic limitations? This exodus of talent is exacerbated by Oklahoma's relatively low college attainment rates overall. While the state has some fine universities, the proportion of the adult population holding a bachelor's degree or higher lags behind the national average. This means there's a smaller pool of highly educated workers to begin with, making the departure of those who do get an education even more impactful. It creates a vicious cycle. Fewer educated workers make the state less attractive to high-tech, knowledge-based industries, which in turn means fewer good jobs for college graduates, prompting more of them to leave. It's a self-perpetuating problem that dims the state's future prospects, and the consequences of this brain drain are far-reaching. It means a shrinking tax base, as these often higher-earning individuals take their incomes and their tax dollars elsewhere. This further strains the state's ability to fund the very services that might have convinced them to stay in the first place. It means less innovation, less entrepreneurship, and a less vibrant civic and cultural life. It means an aging population left behind, with fewer young people to drive growth and fill critical roles. Essentially, Oklahoma is exporting one of its most valuable resources, its human capital, and that's a surefire way to ensure that the future remains as challenging as the present. So, there you have it. Oklahoma, it's spirited, yes, it's vast, undeniably. And its people are fiercely proud of their heritage and their resilience. But as we've seen, it's also a state that's undeniably broken in many ways, a place that can be fierce and unforgiving to those who call it home. The red dirt isn't just picturesque, it's soaked in struggle, a testament to the daily battles fought by its residents just to get by. It's not that people don't want to live in Oklahoma or that they don't love their state. Many do, with a passion that's truly admirable, but thriving here, truly thriving, demands a level of tenacity, a grit, a sheer bloody-mindedness that, frankly, most people can't sustain indefinitely, especially when other states offer a smoother path. It's a place that asks a lot of its citizens and too often gives too little in return, testing their loyalty at every turn. So, what about you? After hearing all this, could you make it in the Sooner State? Do you have what it takes to navigate its challenges and carve out a life amidst its beautiful, albeit harsh, realities? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive illuminating or perhaps just thoroughly depressing, do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe for more explorations of places that are bold in spirit, but nearly impossible to call home. Until next time, stay informed and maybe, just maybe, check the tornado forecast.